Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my monthly compendium of case reports between the 6th to the 25th of January, 2021. Case file 17 to 36. Case file number 17. Written by user WolfieBlue333. A simple night out spent camping with his girlfriend, relaxing by their bonfire at night. It somehow moved before their very eyes. So onto the story. It's kinda short and kinda weird. Some months ago, my girlfriend and I went camping in a new spot that one of my friends told me about. It was beautiful and very secluded, which I liked. A typical camping trip, just staying there one night. We did the standard routine, arrived there, unpacked our stuff, then went exploring. It was so beautiful, really have the alone in the heart of the forest kind of vibe. Now to the weird stuff. We were around the bonfire eating dinner, grilled steaks and some potatoes for sides. When we finished, we started talking about life, stuff, etc., both looking towards the fire, when all of a sudden the fire moved. What I can compare it to is the Animus glitch from the Assassin's Creed video game series. Like it sort of moves from left to right in a matter of seconds. We both looked at each other and instantly locked our eyes. At the same time, we tell each other, "Did you see that?" It was super weird and left us with a very confusing feeling. We tried to rationalize it, but didn't find any logical explanation, so we brushed it off as the smoke or some sort of eye illusion. Notes: I've been camping and hiking since my earliest memories, and never have I experienced anything like this. My girlfriend and I saw it at the same time, so it wasn't something that I could have experienced alone. Can you guys give me any insight into this? What could have happened? Case notes. File number 17. When you say the bonfire glitched out similar to the Animus effect in AC, did it look like a sort of redshift in its plane of existence? Also, did the bonfire return to its starting position after this event? Were there any disturbances noted around it if you checked? So I think we live in a simulation. Your experience is just contributing another token of evidence to my treasure trove. There are a lot of glitch types that could corroborate this too, such as time freezes, which I think points towards critical updates or patches of upcoming areas or timelines that just can't be postponed. I think we're playing immersive characters as part of this grand game. The author responded to my questions with, "Yes, it kinda shifted position. In a matter of seconds, it moved diagonally upwards to the left, then it came back to its normal position, sort of a reset. And no disturbances. After the shock passed, we investigated the place and it looked totally normal. We only got left a weird confused feeling. I only remembered this story because I was playing AC Valhalla, and some mysteries are these Animus glitches, where you have to parkour around an obstacle course. But after seeing the movement of the environment, it reminded me so much of this experience. And yes, I agree with you. We live in a sort of accepted simulation that becomes our reality. A lot of these occurrences are like lifting the veil of reality." Continuing my thoughts. Not too much more to say here. It's a simple glitch, but I really do think it points to the simulation effect. It just fits in my mind. Case file number 18. Written by user Don't Send Me Butt Pics. Hey, it's their username. Writes about a skateboard suddenly, with multiple witnesses, vanishing, only to reappear later in an inexplicable location. Here's what happened last night that I still can't explain. So I was learning how to skateboard with two friends. My friend and I were about to skate down my street on our boards, which is slightly downhill. Then a homeless man walked up to us. We chatted briefly and he asked if we had any money. I said I didn't have cash, but that my roommate made a bunch of homeless bags that I could run into my house and grab one for him really quickly. At this point, I had one foot on the board and one foot on the ground. There was a snowbank right next to me, so I know I would have wedged the skateboard into the snowbank so it wouldn't have rolled down the hill. I was right next to it. It was the obvious choice. I was right across from my house, so I ran in and grabbed the bags, which were right next to the front door. This whole thing took about 20 seconds. I come out, give the homeless man the bags, and immediately look down and say, "Where's my board?" My friends looked confused and said they don't know. They just saw me on it. The homeless man also said he didn't see it. We thought maybe he took it, but it was a whole and complete skateboard, and he used both hands to open the bags and look through them. Plus, he was standing in front of my friends the whole time, nowhere to hide it. Also, it was 1 a.m. and dead outside. The only other thing that happened was that a car passed while I was inside, so they thought that maybe someone grabbed it real quick from the car and stole it. Highly unlikely. We looked around for 20 minutes. We looked down the street in case it rolled off and no one noticed, and we were stumped. I asked them 1,000,000 times if they were screwing with me, and they sincerely promised they weren't, and were just as confused as me. It also was my friend's board, so he was concerned because it was expensive. I told them that it was probably a glitch in the Matrix, and that I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up today. Sure enough, my friend leaves this morning, calls me, and says, "I've closed the loop in the Matrix. I was walking to my car this morning up the road, and the skateboard was right next to the dumpster." The dumpster was a bit up the road, which is uphill, and we weren't anywhere near there during our conversation. I still have absolutely no idea how it got there, and without anybody noticing within 20 seconds of time. Case notes, file number 18. So let's examine the common solutions to this glitch. First, there's the obvious angle that your friends, or the homeless man, were distracted and missed the skateboard rolling down the street, having been somehow dislodged from the snowbank. This explanation doesn't work due to the skateboard appearing up the hill, against gravity. The second possibility. The homeless man managed to David Copperfield the skateboard right under your friend's noses and keep it concealed, only to later abandon it up the hill, and you stated that it was pricey, so this would make no sense at all. And third, your friends played a prank on you, although I don't really suspect this one either because they'd tell you to get your reaction. That's the whole point of pranking someone. So while this glitch does read as more ordinary, when you exhaust the logical explanations, it actually becomes quite extraordinary. Another example of material objects vanishing, though in your case, at least it came back to you. Case file number 19, written by user LiquidGold83, describes a night's events where they seemingly died, but then consciously woke back up 20 minutes before their death. So this happened last week. It just took me some time to come to terms with it, to process the mind-bending reality of existence. I got a phone call from my next door neighbor late in the evening, asking if I can help him move a mattress into his room upstairs. His mom is ill and has a big heavy sleep number bed. I, of course, ran over to help because they're great neighbors. I get over there and his friend, who's also a priest, was there to help. I helped them figure out how to separate the mattress from the bed so we could fit it upstairs. We get it all moved up and back in place when my neighbor asks if I can help them move an armoire upstairs too. I think nothing of it, and we pull it out of his travel trailer and start bringing it up the stairs of his house. This is where I died. The front stairs are 11 steps long. I was on the lower end of the armoire, about 6 steps up, when my neighbor and his friends lose a handle on the armoire and it comes crashing down on me, and I fall backwards towards the pavement. I then wake up in my dining room, to my phone ringing and my wife asking me if I'm going to answer the phone. It's my neighbor asking me if I can help move a bed upstairs for his mom. I go over there and meet his priest friend again, as this has been the first time I met him. I say I can help with the bed, but I can't help with the armoire. My neighbor was like, "How do you know about the armoire?" I then proceeded to tell them I'm pretty sure I just died. I spent the next hour talking with the priest. He had so many questions. My neighbor didn't believe it until I described the upstairs bedroom in perfect detail, down to the metal mattress frame on the floor and the intricate headboard leaning against the wall. I had never been upstairs in their house before. The priest asked me what I saw after I died. I told him I never actually died. Before it happened, I woke up at my dining room table 20 minutes before my death. Case notes, file number 19. Okay, so this is one of the most concise and clear examples I've ever come across regarding quantum immortality. It's curious though how you jump back in time 20 minutes prior to the incident. So usually in quantum immortality situations, the jump of consciousness into other universes, the U, is instantaneous and happens at the same point in time as the original, just without the death part. I suppose it's possible there were no other available U's in that exact moment, if that makes sense, until you took control of that version of you 20 minutes ago, and altered the future in the process because of your knowledge of events to come. So that universe was basically the same, minus some small changes, but you changed the outcome that would have come to pass if you wouldn't have died in your original timeline and universe. If this is possible, then it puts into question even the nature of time and its connection to consciousness. Perhaps quantum immortality could even extend beyond natural aging-related deaths, where dying in that instance simply reconnects you to an earlier version of yourself, to continue living forever in different versions or timelines in those parallel universes. The only thing about this, though, is there aren't a lot of people walking around who just think they came from other universes where they had died like an hour before of natural aging. I do know though, if this is a simulation, then maybe we get to choose in the real world if we want to continue the saved game or something like that, or just start a new playthrough. It's a fascinating thought. Case file number 20, written by user You Named Me Dog, describes an encounter with an older gentleman who clearly was interested in her romantically. She then met him again as his younger self. 4.5 years ago, I had a job selling cookies and fudge to tourists in my city. Occasionally, someone would come into the shop drunk to flirt with me, but not very often, as I was this awkward 20-year-old with bad acne and a terrible sense of humor. One memorable evening, a much older gentleman entered. I offered him a small sample of fudge as was required. He looked like he could have been in his mid-50s with the energy of a 30-year-old. He had a thin frame, thick white hair, a narrow face, and piercing eyes. It felt like he was hitting on me, and it was very confusing. He was older, flamboyant, and he wanted me to show him around. He asked me when I would get off work that night. I had neither the social skills nor the confidence to tell him to F off. I agreed to meet him after work and wondered if I was actually going to show him around town, if that meant something more than my innocent mind was willing to believe. Feeling kind of frightened and helpless, I told my male coworker what had just happened. He told me he would walk me to my car after work, so that I could tell the white-haired man never mind and leave easily. I didn't expect the white-haired man to be waiting for me outside several hours later, but he was. My coworker walked me out of the building, and as we hurried past, I looked at him and said, "Sorry, can't. I just can't." The man bowed his head low and nodded as if he fully understood. He seemed deeply disappointed. Fast forward a year later, I'm working at a new job in the same area. I had been working there for about a month when a new face entered the scene. They hired a young man with a thin frame, thick dark hair, a narrow face, and piercing eyes. This young man was flirtatious, intense, and just my type. He was fun and flamboyant, and we almost dated, but I had to put the brakes on it for personal reasons. I was deeply upset about it for a long time. He used to talk to me a lot, and he was the first person who had ever liked me back. I know logically that these are two different people. One older guy looking to have a good time, and one young man who I miss a lot. Sometimes I choose to believe in the time traveler story, because if it could be true, it means that he misses me too. Case notes, file number 20. So do we exist in multiple timelines at the same time? Like past save points, but concurrently playing out. But anyways, traveling back in time is much harder, and if it is possible, you shouldn't be connecting with your own timeline. It should actually be a new timeline, or not a new one, just a separate one, similar to crossing over actually, but without the catalyst of death we're talking about. If we did invent a time machine, that should be how it works. This prevents all those nasty paradoxes. Somehow, this older man crossed over, maybe through a time machine, maybe just by happenstance, and then maybe your future lover was aware of his past self falling into heavy emotions with you. I dare not say love. Unlikely the future version was consciously aware of having met you in the current past future. Boy, timelines aren't simple, are they? So in a nutshell, I think if he was a time traveler, quote unquote, however you want to describe it, I don't think he was consciously aware of you, of having connected with you before. And maybe he didn't in his originating timeline, but you two are just really meant for each other, in a sense, just not at the right time for him. Of course, it very well may be simply a lookalike and just a coincidence. But it is fun to consider the possibilities that reach beyond linear time. Case file number 21, written by user GreenyBeanie16. On her drive home from work, without understanding how, she realizes she's in an alternate reality. I have to share this story. It's been bothering me for some time now. First, a little bit of background. I usually go to work right around 2 p.m. and get out around 8:30 p.m. I always take the same route to and from work. Also, I've been working at this particular store for about 6 months. Well, one day, about a month and a half ago, I started feeling weird while I was at work. Almost like I was there, my body was there, but my mind was somewhere else. It started about 2 hours before my shift ended. I thought, okay, kind of weird, but I was taking cold medicine at the time and figured it was just that messing with my head, until my drive home. On this particular night, I got out of work a little late. My district manager came in because he had to unplug and shut down everything in the store so the city could do some kind of energy something something. I don't remember the details. I just know that if we didn't unplug everything, our crap would get fried. So I'm driving home about 20 minutes later than usual, and my anxiety starts building to the point where I feel like I'm going to have a panic attack, and the feeling of being there but not there starts to get worse. That's when I see it. As I said before, I take precisely the same route every single day, to and from work. But as I went down the road, I looked to my left and saw this big semiconductor plant, all lit up, that had never frickin' been there before. This isn't a location you can just forget or miss while passing by it. I pulled over on the side of the road, freaking the F out. I know for a fact it had never been there before, and it's really hard to miss, driving home in complete darkness with a huge lit up power plant. You didn't even have to look for it, couldn't miss it. I sat there for a minute until I had calmed down a bit, trying to reassure myself it had always been there. I just wasn't paying attention. I'm not going crazy, I probably just hadn't seen it before. A few minutes later, my boyfriend called me and asked if I could pick up some McDonald's for him. Sure, not a problem. I passed by one on the drive home. The feeling of anxiety and not being there started to fade, until I pulled into the drive-thru, ordered my food, and then a worker I had never seen before was sitting at the front window. I asked him how long he'd been working there. He said, about 2 months now. Now I'm truly freaking out. I've come to this place every single day for months at varying times throughout the day. Even weirder yet, he was the only worker there that night. I'm sure there's an explanation for that part, but it sure didn't help me feel any better after discovering a new power plant that just popped up out of nowhere about 20 minutes earlier. I proceeded to go home and have a full-blown panic attack, curled into a ball, shaking, crying, hyperventilating, the whole deal. I told my boyfriend about the power plant I'd seen, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's always been there. Have you not seen it before?" And now, every day, I look at that damn place and freak out a little bit, because I know it was never there before. Since then, I've noticed tiny little details about my life that are just slightly different, like my dog not knowing tricks she's known since she was a pup, or my boyfriend pronounces a few words differently than he did before. The only explanation that I can come up with is that I accidentally slipped into an alternate reality while on my drive home from work. Case Notes, File Number 21. I'll say this does feel like a textbook quantum immortality case to me. I wonder though, since you said you were feeling off while at work, but at this point presumably still in your own reality, that you said you were taking medication for a cold. Maybe somehow that cold was more severe than you thought and led to your death in the originating reality. Maybe it was more than a cold. And then by the time you went home, your consciousness had already crossed over. So in that case, it wouldn't be the drive that caused it. Everything does fit with this theory. As you described, there are many other details that are off, like your dog not remembering tricks she's always known since a pup. Your boyfriend telling you that the power plant you witnessed has always been there. That's just impossible. Like you said, there's no way you could have missed it. Not even once, especially since you drive there every single day. Well, yeah, I fully concur that you are in a new reality. There's no doubt about that. The truly interesting question for me is always what the catalyst is for the crossover. Since, to be fair, the explanation of dying from a cold is rather tenuous at best, I'll admit. But I don't know, what else could have happened? Maybe you somehow died in a car crash on the drive home? But the thing is, usually people remember what their death is. Maybe we don't always remember what our death is. I wonder what affects that or plays with that. Interesting. Case file number 22. Written by user RunnerGirl2001. Friend tried to set him up with Maggie. This led to possibly saving his life. Only his friend never did set him up. All names used here are fake. So here's some background. I was trying to get over an ex at the time. Then my friend Maggie randomly texted me saying, "Hey, would you be opposed to going on a date with Audrey?" Audrey is a mutual friend. I say no. I try to talk to her, but I don't feel any sparks. The next day, I try to ask a group of friends to hang out. There's one girl in the group, and one of the other friends in the group texts me saying, "Dude, stop hitting on Alexandra. Focus on Audrey." I'm like, ugh. Later that day, I was spaced out at a traffic light, completely sober, when the truck in front of me turns right. I automatically think, the light must be green. So I go. I hear some honking behind me, but I ignore it. I was halfway through the intersection, 30 miles per hour back road with a 55 mile per hour highway, when I realized the light was red, and for some reason, I stopped in the middle of the intersection. I heard a car behind me swerve to not hit me, so I kept going and had to stop on the side of the road to process what just happened. This is when things get weird. My friends never mentioned Audrey to me again, and a month later, she starts dating someone else, Jake. I assume that was the reason why. However, a few months later I bring up to Maggie about how she tried to set me up with Audrey, but she just stares at me blankly and says, "No, we were trying to set her up with Jake." I thought she was pulling my chain, but I went back to old text messages, and I couldn't find any that mentioned Audrey in the first place, let alone friends trying to set me up with her. The weird thing about this experience is I didn't black out. I was conscious the whole time. I don't know if I died and switched to another reality, but I know damn well that I wasn't imagining this. Also, Maggie claimed she had been having consistent dreams of me dying, and they stopped when this event happened. Edit. I texted Maggie, asking if she remembered trying to set us up together, and her response was, "No, Audrey and Jake were together, I'm pretty sure." Case Notes, File Number 22. So my impression of this isn't a quantum immortality crossover scenario, because you don't remember your death. It's true that not every single case of quantum immortality involves remembering the specifics of the originating death, but if we go back to case number 19, they didn't remember the details either. They kinda whisked back 20 minutes in the past. Although one of the listeners mentioned a theory that perhaps this was just a premonition, not quantum immortality. I like that theory, so maybe that's why. It's also the fact you didn't remember any details, and also that Maggie was having dreams of you dying prior. That detail is weird. So there's some element of premonition involved here too, perhaps. Maybe your mind was syncing subconsciously with hers, leading to you spacing out near and in that intersection, where you were lost in thought about Alexandra and Audrey. If you hadn't spaced out, perhaps that swerving car would have hit you. One little domino tumbling, leading to a cataclysmic fate. Case file number 23. Written by user TACQTime. What happens when you experience an intense physical episode, a sort of panic attack with great anxiety, then find out a loved one passed away almost exactly in that moment? My dad died in December of 2017. I lived with him until December 4th, when I moved out into my own one-bedroom apartment. I worked all day December 5th, then December 6th was my day off. I spent the day buying things for my new apartment and organizing, and then around noon, I had really fast and drawn-out heart palpitations, unlike I've ever had before or since. I seriously thought I was going to die for a moment, because it lasted for almost 5 seconds, which is a long time when your heart is on the fritz. After that, I had an overwhelming feeling of sadness and guilt, and I just sat on the floor crying for a while. I couldn't explain the source of sadness I was experiencing. I'm usually pretty good at pinpointing why I'm feeling a certain way, but there just was no reason for it. I texted my dad, "Hey Dad, how you doing?" But I never got a response. The next day at around 7 p.m., my sister and I went to check on my dad because nobody had heard from him in a while. We found him dead in his bed. Now, this next part may sound a bit morbid, but this is the reason I think my dad died when I had heart palpitations and an extreme feeling of sadness. My mom looked up a decomposition chart to try to calculate exactly how long he had been dead, and based on the state of his body when we found him, he would have died the day before at around noon. I won't get into the specifics of what killed him, but it was related to his heart. Edit. I'm amazed at the number of similar stories you all have to share here. It seems we're all connected to our families more than we think. I would encourage anyone reading this thread to look at the comments because there are some amazing stories here. Thank you all for opening up about your personal experiences. I am legitimately honored that I could provide this thread where we can all share these strange occurrences together. I am very sorry to everyone who has experienced the loss of a loved one. It's not easy at all. My heart goes out to you. Case notes, file number 23. Well, first off, I'm going to offer my sincere condolences. There are a lot of glitches that relate to our own mortality, and it's just sad to read them. But it is good that we can share them together. I agree with you there. It also provides so much insight into our universe, how it works, or at least fragments and clues. I think I agree that there's some sort of connection that we all share. At the fundamental level, for example, particles can be entangled and connected, and we don't really understand how. We can't use it to transmit information, at least not as we understand it now, but they're still connected. At the macro level, it seems our emotions, related to concentration and focus on specific objects or people, how much we think of something, lead to the forging of these bonds. It's almost like memories, actually. If you have a memory of something you learned, or something you just remember, the more you think about it, the more the pathways for those synapses are reinforced, and you can recall that memory easily then. But if you never think about it, it's very hard to access. But perhaps more accurately, the perception or tapping into the bonds that always exist between us all. So it's like the memories are always there, we just can't always access them. I can't pretend to know the specifics, I'm speculating. I'm also reminded of a previous case, the case file number 9, where someone's pet had astral projected his future emotional state into the mind of his owner. It's a small glitch per se, but very striking. Even with our pets, anything we connect strongly with, we can sense what's happening to them, and perhaps even what will happen to them later. Case file number 24, written by user StormWolf1337. He was swimming, just a normal day, but started to drown. Panic ensued, friends panicking, then he was alright. Was this quantum immortality with a teleportation event too? I've told this story so many times before, and to this day I have no rational explanation for it, nor does anyone that has analyzed the sequence of events. It began on a trip to a popular creek many would gather at to party, take a dip, or just hang with the family. The water of the privately owned creek was dark and about knee level for a regular adult, with even children being able to wade most of it without worries. There was a small deep section that was more to the far edges, but I was unaware of this. It was summer vacation, when I was about 16 or 17 I think, and I got my group together for a huge party there. After a few hours of us partying and hanging on the shore, a few of us took a dip. My swimming skills are nothing amazing, but I can at least not sink like cement. I began wading out a bit, and within seconds I felt my feet completely slide off the edge of the shallower bit into the deep end. I could feel the forward momentum of my slipping carrying me forward a lot too, so much so that I couldn't even reach the edge with my toe tips. I began to panic and sink. It felt like that was the end, that surety of death after gulping down nothing more than cold water. I couldn't get a foothold, much less propel myself in any direction. As I swallowed mouthfuls of liquid, hoping for oxygen, I could feel the darkness of the water itself just surround my consciousness, as if I was being taken by that cold abyss. At that point, I kinda came to terms with death. This is it, I'm done. At that exact moment, that exact thought, I felt a spark of pure energy. To hell with this, I'm not gonna die, was the only thought I had left. I attempted to flail a bit. It was a useless movement, but I wasn't giving up. Somehow or another, I ended up back completely on the shallower bit, my feet firmly planted on muddy soil that wasn't there a second before. Not on the edge of the shallow bit, but about 4 feet away from the deep end. I then saw everyone rushing towards me, my friends swimming frantically. To their eyes, I was in the deep end but a second ago, about to drown, and the next I had saved myself before they were even halfway to me. Not more than a minute or two had passed, yet for me, it seemed so much longer, my perception of time changing because of adrenaline, who knows. There was simply no way I could have moved that distance through my weak flailing at the limits of my breath. I moved at least 6 or 8 feet total, as 2 dudes in the group swam out to where they saw me, and also based on the distance from the slope that ends the shallow bit to the deep end. It was a considerable distance if you aren't swimming. They were all pretty dumbfounded. No one knew what the hell happened, but we were all just bloody relieved. We've discussed that event so many times, yet it remains a genuine mystery to them and me especially. Maybe I teleported. Maybe I was saved by some higher being, a guardian angel even. All that I'm certain of is that I might have teleported through space-time before that spark of life left me. Case notes, file number 24. This is peculiar indeed. As I'm reading this, my gut instinct is to assume a crossover. That you died, quantum immortality saved you, effectively loading a save state into another universe. But the odd thing is your group seeing this happen. That you were drowning and then you weren't. You'd have remembered drowning, but the group wouldn't have seen anything out of the ordinary. Unless it's sort of a combo. Maybe a guardian angel saved you in the quantum immortality crossover universe, not the original one but where you ended up. That seems unlikely though. Why save you after you crossed over? Unless for some reason your consciousness needs to inhabit this version of yourself. I don't know. It's a stretch, to be sure. But outside of actual teleportation, which shouldn't be possible, and I haven't really read any accounts of that. Of course you could say, well, maybe adrenaline just gave you ultra strength for a second, and you managed to propel yourself much further than you think? Maybe. I guess I can't discount that. But I'm sure as you were there, and as your friends describe it, it just doesn't seem like that. They would have seen ripples on the water move. Let us know if anything else odd or, let's say, important happens to you in the future. I'm very curious. Case number 25, written by user Isalane. She made a call to her dad while he was visiting relatives, and this happened 30 years ago. Her dad just recognizing this call way in the past as his daughter's voice. I recently posted about me disappearing into thin air when I was sleeping, and my family couldn't find me when I woke up. They swore up and down that they searched all over for me, but weren't able to find me. This is not an update, but something that just happened yesterday. 3 days ago, I was having a conversation with my father, and he was telling me about his university life. My dad came from nothing. He had a very difficult upbringing and went to the worst school and high school in our city. When it was time for him to join university, my grandfather passed away, leaving my dad to take care of the rest of the family, as he was the oldest son. He took the wrong major because of the terrible advice from some people. He severely regrets that to this day. The courses were taught in English, which is a second language for us. He didn't even know the language. My dad told me that it was the darkest time in his life, and he just wanted to run away. He was even thinking of taking his own life. Now, very recently, he got his master's in English literature. He was telling me that he didn't think it would ever be possible for him. My dad just recently finished this degree at the age of 55. The next morning, my dad had to drive to this town because his distant relatives live there, and they're struggling financially. My dad is a very kind soul, and he wanted to help them. The town is 3 hours drive away. He usually takes public transport, but didn't because of the recent crisis. He drove there and my mom was worried, so we decided we'll give him a call every hour to check. Well, I decided to call him. Now, keep in mind, because it's a highway, network signals get very weak. He told me to wait and parked at a nearby restaurant. It was like a checkpoint for trucks. I don't know what came over me, but I started crying and went on to tell him about how proud of him I was. I just babbled and kept saying that he shouldn't think he's lacking because he's not. He was an amazing father and a great person to look up to. You guys, my dad just started crying. He told me that he'll talk to me when he returns. Well, he returned, and he just hugged me and was telling me about how 30 years ago he was visiting the same town, and it was the time when he was at his lowest. He was visiting the same relatives, and he was on a bus which stopped at a petrol station. He called his mother, and when he picked up the phone without even dialing, he heard my voice. It was telling him the same thing which I had just said yesterday. He said that he didn't even call my grandmother. He just stood there and cried. It gave him the strength to keep fighting. He said he just now realized that it was me whose voice he had heard back then. My parents are now taking this as a sign from God, who helped my dad when he thought no one else was there for him. Case notes, file number 25. This is such a beautiful tale. So either God gave him the impression of your voice talking to him, a daughter that he didn't even know he was going to have, the exact words he needed to hear at the time to save him. As you mentioned, he was even contemplating suicide, so it really did save him. Or somehow your call transcended time in a way that really defies the traditional sense of time travel, because normally any kind of connection to the past would involve a parallel universe. This helps to avoid paradoxes. But maybe this isn't always the case. One way or another, you helped your dad before he even had you. It's just truly beautiful. I think that's all I need to say here. I'm proud of your dad and of you. Amazing. Case file number 26. Written by user Impressive Picture. It was a night's walk, urged on by an inner voice, leading to the impression of total and absolute isolation and panic. Was this a crossover? Last night at 10:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., I was out for a walk. I live in a town with no curfew in place, so I don't believe that can excuse these experiences. It started as such. At around 10 p.m., I had a sudden urge to just go outside for a walk. This isn't the first time this has happened, as I have previously heard a voice in my head saying, "Take a walk," over and over again on multiple occasions since I was 9 years old, always at nighttime. This time it was simply a feeling and urge though, not a voice. So I got my laptop, gathered together a playlist of music, and went. Immediately after leaving my house, a slight but not too noticeable feeling of paranoia kicked in. I ignored it and headed to my first destination, that being the playground about 3 blocks away from me. Along the walk, I did feel some strange feelings, which we'll go into more depth about later, of isolation and fear. But I continued on, telling myself that fear is what sets humans back from having beautiful experiences. I arrived at the playground and sat on a bench for a few minutes, being relatively calm. Not too many noticeable things here. After sitting for about 7 minutes, I got up and began walking back home, but had another destination in mind. The destination was the hill which overlooked my town and the one next over, and a bit of the Atlantic. As I neared my house, I made the decision that I was going to go to the hill. So I passed my house and turned to go down the main road. Here's where things begin to get a little strange. Keep in mind that I live in a normally busy town with cars going through all day and night. As I'm walking down the main road that cars usually are traversing down, I see absolutely no cars passing me by on the road. None. A strange feeling of paranoia began rising in me as I made my way downtown. A feeling which I'll touch on later. As I arrived downtown where the road split into a roundabout, there were still no cars, not even on the main roundabout. I took off my headphones momentarily, and I heard nothing, and I mean genuinely nothing. Absolute dead silence. It was completely quiet except for the flowing of the river which was near me. Not even the sound of the cars on the highway in the distance were present. This got me a little weirded out, but I kept moving. As I crossed the road, I looked at the big Christmas tree that my town had, the white wooden fence around it, the white lights, the benches surrounding it, all felt very strangely familiar, yet mildly uncomfortable. The feelings of paranoia began to rise, but I had not yet distinguished what they were about. I made my way up the road and turned onto the road which would lead me to the top of the hill. The feelings of paranoia kept rising as I got closer to the top of the hill, and about halfway up to the top I was able to distinguish finally what the paranoia was about. It was about being completely alone. I realized at that moment that I, from what I could tell, was completely alone. I began to feel like the reality I was experiencing wasn't even my reality, that something was wrong, that I might have shifted realities. The feelings of paranoia worsened as I got closer to the top of the hill. Eventually I reached the point where the street lamps cut off and only the dim blue moonlight lit the road in front of me, which it did quite well. This is when I heard a voice in the back of my head say, "There's no saving him now." I ignored this voice again, on the notion that fear is what causes humans to not have beautiful experiences. The feelings of paranoia were very noticeably high at this point, as I made my way down the dimly lit road to the viewing point. The viewing point was surrounded by a forest, but part of which had been cleared into flat land, so that people can play with their dogs and not have to navigate their way through woods to get to the viewing point. I walked up the couple of stairs that led to this plain, which was completely illuminated by the moon, and turned to the right to see the viewing point. The feelings of paranoia now were slightly lowered because of the beautiful sights in front of me, but they were still there. I walked over to the bench, which overlooked the view, and sat down on it. As I sat there, I noticed something. There were no birds. It was completely silent. There was nothing but the occasional wind. No cars could be heard, nothing. This, I found, was extremely unusual, even for a winter night. For the moment, though, I ignored this and kept looking at the view. It was beautiful, but something about it felt strangely familiar, yet slightly uncomfortable, like the Christmas tree. As I observed the sky, I took note of how the sky looked somewhat like a dome, and I began pondering to myself, what if none of this is real? What if all this is made just for me? I sat on these questions for a bit before pulling out my laptop to change a few songs. This is where things started to get very strange. As I pulled out my laptop, the paranoia shot back up immediately, and it was now extremely noticeable to the point where it was bothering me. At this point, strangely, both my headphones and laptop died, despite both of them being relatively well charged. Just after this, I got an immediate sensation in my body of panic. Every muscle in my body was screaming at me, "You need to leave now. You're in severe danger." Nothing caused this sensation. I wasn't hearing or seeing anything. In fact, as I said, it was completely silent. This is when I took note that there weren't any cars in the distance either. You could see 2 towns over with this view, yet I saw no cars passing at all. The absence of the cars and the birds and all sounds now were contributing to the paranoia. The paranoia, speaking of, was now overwhelming as I scrambled to bag up my things, my body still screaming at me to leave immediately. I no longer had the sensation of being alone, but the sensation of being chased or watched. I quickly zipped up my bag with my laptop and headphones and ran out of the viewing spot and onto the road. Where I ran from the viewing spot, the panic still stabbing at me, feeling like I might cry from it. I nearly slipped, and that's when I began to just slow down and walk. As I noticed that the further I got from the viewing spot, the calmer I began to become. I made my way down to the road, which would lead me back downtown and back home. That's when I looked behind. I saw nothing, but the feeling of, don't go back there, or something will happen, was there, and palpable. Funny thing is, after leaving the hill area, I started seeing cars and people. Downtown was no longer empty, and I could hear cars in the distance. Thoughts were running wildly through my mind as I made my way back downtown. A theory I had is I may have shifted realities to one where I was completely alone, and that if I had stayed there, I would have permanently been shifted to that reality. The walk back home no longer felt alone, it felt normal, as my day walks did. It felt like I was at home. That's when I took notice that when I was walking downtown, that was one of the many things that felt off. It was like it felt like I wasn't in my original reality. Everything about it was off. What do you guys think the explanation is, if there is one? Case notes, file number 26. So I'm thinking of shadow people here, reading this. So there's nothing at all suggesting that you had died here. The catalyst is unknown. But I brought up the shadow people because of a few experiences I read prior. One I narrated here, actually. I forget the case file. I think case file number 7. I'll have to check. Anyways, there are people stuck in the limbo realm between occupied realities. That's what I think shadow people are. I think this ties into simulation theory too, where effectively you loaded into an empty server. You were not meant to be there. This gave you a truly overwhelming sense of loneliness, being trapped into oblivion, forgotten, erased almost. A sense of despair. Your conscious mind couldn't quite piece together what was wrong, but your subconscious knew this isn't right. It makes you wonder if there aren't a bunch of lost souls stuck in realms or servers they aren't meant to be in, all alone. None of this explains how you escaped though and transitioned back into an occupied universe. I'm glad you did though. Maybe a developer or game dev just moved you out. Of course, why they wouldn't do this with the other lost souls there, I don't know. Maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe this is what a guardian angel is too. Basically, the developers or moderators are paying attention, but there's just so many people that they can get lost and forget some people, or just some slip through the cracks and they can't be found. If simulation theory is true with quantum immortality and multiverse theory, then perhaps there are just so many servers running concurrently that they can't keep track of them all. I don't know. It's a very interesting thought, though, I think. I'd also touch on those inner voices, just saying my instinct is they're sort of like cheat sheets from your real hosts in the world, kind of relaying messages, not directly, but sort of, without you knowing where they're from. Yeah, just an idea. Case file number 27. Written by user King Pantaloons. They witnessed the duplication of their car on the side of the road. Then it vanished moments after seeing it. If you look in my post history, there's a post from R, Well That Sucks, where I showed the photo of my flat tire after I hit a really bad pothole. The tire iron in my car didn't even fit the jack well, and it didn't fit the lug nuts on the tire at all. So we called my roommates, now referred to as B, Dad. We had a hiccup with one of the nuts needing a key rather than the tools we were using, but it was all sorted out. Spare tire on, drive home, problem solved, right? We had to go 10 miles to get home, almost exactly 3/4 of the way through. B is in the middle of talking when she stops in the middle of her sentence. In the same moment she stops, I start to blurt out, "Holy crap, that's my car." There, on the side of the road, as we're driving past, is my own car. And I don't mean a car that just looked like mine. Any car owner I'm sure would agree with me that you can just look at 100 cars with the exact same make and model as yours, and you'll just know which one is yours. That was my car, parked on the side of the road. B saw it too, and we both mentioned having the thought of, why are we over there? We're supposed to be here. We get home, safe and sound. No more strangeness. Until my wife mentions to me that she had been watching for more potholes, looking directly where that parked version of my car should have been, that we saw, but she didn't see it. She didn't see any car at all, just the side of the road. As she mentions that, I realize that I saw the lights from the car when we were behind it, but they were gone when I checked in the rearview mirror. B and I then, in separate conversations, where the other wasn't involved, both spoke the same phrase. I think something really bad was supposed to happen, but we narrowly avoided it. I think we might be lucky to have made it home safe. Case notes, file number 27. These types of glitches, where you see something that shouldn't be possible, they're potently dangerous. They can make someone feel like they're going crazy, that the essence of reality isn't properly ordered or rational. This is why I'm so happy for you that your roommate was also there to witness this. One question, did you witness yourselves too, inside or outside of the vehicle, or just the car itself which you're certain was your own? The more eerie aspect is that the duplicate car vanished by the time you checked your rearview mirror. This then is likely to have been a glimpse through the membrane separating us from other concurrently running realities. Or in a nutshell, you just saw yourselves as you were in a different reality. I just don't understand why this happens though. There's a few other glitches I've read. There was one person that saw an apartment he was checking in a configuration that it wasn't supposed to be in. So he was peering through, but then it stopped moments later, just like you when you saw the car and then it wasn't there anymore. I don't know why people are able to do this, what the catalyst is, and why it usually lasts for such a short amount of time. Maybe I wonder if it has to do with the other version of yourselves in that reality. You speak of feeling watched or observed now, since this happened. Maybe by yourself. It's creepy indeed. The author responded to my question with, "We did not see ourselves, no, just the car. Even my roommate recognized it as my car, not just another one of the same make and model." Luckily, the feeling of being watched went away after about 2 days. Nothing since then. Back to my notes. I don't have much more to say on this. All I can say is, I'm glad you're safe, and I'm glad the feeling of being watched went away. Case file number 28. Written by user Lily Magill. Reports of inaccurate data tracking. Even her own son witnessing her car when she wasn't home, but moments later it was gone, shifting between realities. I called my son and said I would be home in 20 minutes. I decided to stop at the gas station and liquor store, which took about 10 minutes in total. I got a call from him on my way home, asking me where I went. I told him I was still 10 minutes away. Usually when I get home, I sit in my car for a few minutes to respond to messages, taking a few minutes of relaxation before entering the house. He said he looked out his window and my car was parked out front in its usual spot, and he saw me sitting inside of it. He always comes out to greet me, so he opened the door and then the car was gone. He looked both ways down the road to see where I went. We live on a mountain in a neighborhood that doesn't have an outlet, so for the most part, there aren't many random cars, especially parked in front of my house. What's weird is if I wouldn't have decided that last-minute stop, I would have been home about the same time he saw that. I have a feeling we may have just witnessed my first, that I know of, doppelganger experience. Update. So, things got weirder. I was at a friend's house that I'm extremely connected to spiritually, to the point of texting her whenever she pops into my head, because I've discovered that means she's thinking of me. She'd respond with, "Get out of my head." I was showing her the Facebook location history that is eerily accurate with when you're on the move and when you've stopped. I scrolled through a few days worth of data and pulled up the day I had the glitch. I noticed it showed I stopped outside of the Nantahala. I was only in Chattanooga that day. It doesn't show me driving there, just a stop, too far away from my house to accidentally connect to a different tower. My friend has asked me if I wanted to ride with her to drop a friend off in NC, but I decided not to. When I showed her this, she got really quiet. She had stopped at a gas station outside of the Nantahala, and for some reason, bought me a pack of gummy snacks that she knew I liked. She'd become scared while driving through, and stopped for a minute. She said she had no idea why she bought those for me. It was like I was with her. I think I might have been. When the glitch happened with my son, it was around the same time she had her experience. I think I was with her in another dimension as well. As well as another one, where my son saw me come home before I actually did, and somehow the glitch was picked up. We've racked our brains trying to think of any other explanation. Case notes, file number 28. What makes this story so weird is that your physical location was mapped and tracked by Facebook, yet somehow it showed you in an area that you know you simply weren't in. And not even that you were just there, you didn't have any tracking history showing that you drove there. So it's as if the other version of yourself pinged in Facebook servers, tracking data, satellites. Do they even have satellites? I guess they do. But only for a split second, or maybe a few minutes. I don't know how long it lasted. I think what we often believe to be as spirituality is in fact a mental but subconscious connection to versions of ourselves operating in other realities, and they're nearly infinite. We glean from them insights into possible happenings, and perhaps even emotional states of those we care for, because so many of these universes are effectively identical to our own. It's like gaining cheat codes in old school games. You're gaining information that you're not supposed to be able to have. How your own device history shows you in a different place though is really what's getting me. It's like you're shifting back and forth multiple times through different universes, where even the tracking data can't make heads or tails of what's going on. At least tracking data you can see, because you're still stuck in one reality when you're observing it. You're seeing data from that copy of the copy of yourself, if that makes any sense. How do you feel internally? People often report an unsettled feeling when switching realities, even feelings of being observed, as the last case I just reported on shows. The author responded with, "Internally, I feel very connected and confused. I didn't add that a few days after I posted this, I was talking to a friend I hadn't talked to in a few weeks. I was about to tell him about this incident when he interrupted me to tell me about something strange had happened. He said he had felt me overwhelmingly out of nowhere and went to the bathroom. When he looked in the mirror, he saw my face instead of his for more than a second. I asked what day. It was the same day all of this happened. I told him about it and he confirmed that I definitely traveled there as well. I'm confused because I don't know how I'm able to do this. It's smacking me in the face that has to be what it is, but how am I unaware? The night before last, I was tripping with some girlfriends. One of them called me outside and I could tell she was on her spiritual trip and I listened to her. Then had this weird moment where I felt and heard everything she was feeling and thinking. She had a realization about reality, and without her voicing it, I said, "I'm figuring out that this is all a big loop." She got freaked out and stopped me, ended up calling her boyfriend to get her after a bit longer. We talked the next day, and she wanted to know what the hell happened. She said it wasn't me that was talking to her, it was like something else was channeling through me. I didn't even get a chance to speak much the night before, but she said it felt like I knew the secrets to the universe that I should know, and it terrified her. The previous night involved little verbal communication during that time, and a whole lot of mental. I don't know. I'm accepting all of it, I just need to understand more. Case file number 29, written by user The Y'all Know. A case of dream into knowledge, a presence, information that could not be obtained through conventional means. So I wake up in the middle of the night, but I'm not anywhere. It's just an empty void, and then I feel this something, I can't explain what it was, trying to communicate with me, but couldn't unless I allowed it to. It felt wrong to let whatever that was tell me what it wanted to. My instincts told me not to. Then it started manifesting itself in the form of unanimated objects, people, a thought, anything, kind of like trying to convince me to let it tell me, but I never complied. Then from this point on, I was aware of my body and was conscious, but at the same time I was somewhere else. I'm sure it wasn't a dream, it didn't feel like one. In the other place I first woke up in this wooden house, in a bed right in front of the door that was never opened or used in this house. I don't know how I knew this, I just did. The door just led to the outside if opened. But this time, the door was poorly closed and one of the lower corners broken. I immediately told someone it had to be fixed ASAP, feeling extremely worried about this for some reason. The next thing I remember, I'm in some kind of line, waiting for some guy who was sitting at a table writing something. I couldn't make out exactly what it was. Sometimes he wrote letters and sometimes musical notes. I don't know what it was like, a song or something like that. While I was waiting, I looked down to my shirt and it had a name sewn onto it, Alexis, not my name. And then I reached the front of the line and I read it again in my shirt, and the guy says my name out loud and starts writing his stuff. Close to the table was standing a woman, and separate from her, but also close to it, there was a kid. Then, all of a sudden, I start feeling this dread from the guy at the table, the woman, and the kid. There were more people around too. And started feeling the something I mentioned before, trying to reach in again. I left that place and came to an empty house with 4 other people that were talking about how tired they were too, of that something. Trying to tell them whatever it wants to say, but can't. After this, I'm only in my real body at last, and instantly, I remembered the grandmother of a friend, she's alive, and started shaking and crying uncontrollably without an apparent reason, and wherever I was before had no relation with her that I know of. During this whole process where my real body felt hot, and I was sweating, like the room temperature, not like a fever. And just when I could regain control of myself, with the crying, I was no longer hot, and came to the realization that my thoughts were completely mine once again. I later looked up the temperature that night, was at 21°C, so it wasn't hot at all. The experience would have been fascinating if it wasn't for the fact that the whole time I felt like I was in danger while my consciousness was divided. I texted my friend right away, as it was his grandmother that triggered my crying, to see if I could reach her and see if everything was okay. I told him everything in great detail. When I got to the part of his grandmother, I started crying uncontrollably again. Here's what made me completely sure that it wasn't a dream. He told me when I first woke up, I described the room to him, was exactly as the room he used to sleep in at his grandparents' house in another town since he was a kid. Even the broken bit of the door, he was going to visit the very same day. Later that day, he texted me again that when he was just about to leave, a worker with the electricity corporation went to his house talking about a problem with the wiring in the houses in the vicinity. Then he excuses himself to call someone on his cell phone and greeted the person he called as Alexis. My friend also told me that his mother and grandmother had something whispered to them before, even though what I sensed wasn't something audible or visible. I just perceived it in a way I can't explain. Nothing weird has happened again, and I just think of all that can't be a coincidence. I know this was a large post, so thank you for reading, and any insight into what might have happened is truly welcome. Case Notes, File Number 29. This is as vivid a case of astral projection as I've ever read. To appear across the world, distance unrelated to location and movement, while you were dreaming. What you saw was merely the manifested interpretation from your brain or spirit, trying to process a great deal of information at once. The element that strikes me is this something, the presence that you felt that you can't describe. I think it represented knowledge itself. You know how they say, with great knowledge comes great sorrow? I think there's a deeper truth to this. This knowledge wanted to tell you, reveal all, but no one can bear it. It would crush us too, and we understand this at the most base level that exists in us. That's why you never complied. You never let the universe, essentially, share all the information with you. It's like in that movie Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, the one that really shouldn't have been made, but at the end, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, the person that was on the quest receives all the information from these alien beings, but he can't handle it. His eyes literally burst out. Or like seeing angels. This kind of information is too much to bear. Their eyes always explode. That seems to be a common trope. I don't know if there's something to that specifically, but I think there is truth to it overall, in that we cannot accept all the information at once. It's simply too much. Perhaps it's even infinite. Case file number 30. Written by user Gialho. He and his dad saw the moon glitch out, with a line running slowly across, almost like a projection distortion. On the evening of the 17th of July, 2019, my dad and I were looking at the moon from the window. This was in southern Norway, in case anyone here also saw it. I remember clearly that the moon was big and orange on this night, because there was something like a partial lunar eclipse going on, although we did not see the eclipse, if I remember correctly. The only reason I even have the date is that I tweeted about it when it happened. Anyways, while looking out the window, I suddenly noticed that there was a dark, solid line across the side of the moon. Not a horizontal line, if I remember correctly, but sort of sideways. I was amazed and quickly called my dad to ask if he could see it too. With the naked eye, without binoculars, it was visible. It was not a telephone line or trail from a plane. The line moved slowly, scanning across the moon, and my dad ran to get his binoculars. I looked at it even closer, and it looked so bizarre. We were both shocked beyond words. I'm not sure how long it took until it scanned fully across, but maybe in 15 minutes since discovery. Has anyone seen anything like this or have any explanation for it? I googled and found results that show people have seen this before, but with a more horizontal line, but still no solid explanation. Case Notes, File Number 30. This sent me down a little rabbit hole of discovery. I'll include an extra video in the description of someone recording this phenomenon. I honestly have no explanation beyond saying that it makes the moon look like a distorted holographic projection. And I don't want to say like the moon is made of cheese, the moon is a hologram, but looking at it, it's just weird unless it's literally just editing or something. Anyone else seen this? I mean, the only logical thing I can say is some kind of atmospheric distortion. But what would cause it specifically at this time to make it look specifically like that? And so rarely? I really don't know. But damn, this is interesting. And a little unsettling, I'll say. Case file number 31. Written by user Manda WYNZ. She went out far to be alone to process her thoughts at the beach. Her car got stuck, no cell signal, yet somehow a kind stranger appeared in that moment to help her. Hey there. It's that time of the night where I'm just recounting old memories instead of falling asleep. I almost completely forgot about this one encounter I had last year and thought it would be a nice one to share on the sub. There was a day I finally had off work and decided I'd head to the beach. The closest beach is about an hour and a half away, and I decided to book it at dawn to try to get there on time to see the sunrise on my own. Just for a bit of background, I wasn't in a very good mindset back then. I always truly felt alone, kinda lost, and hopeless in my life. I felt there was no purpose in living. I'm a person that likes to run away from my problems and tries to find things to keep me distracted and constantly busy. That's why I work a lot and don't have many days off. I dreaded having days off and being alone with my thoughts and figured I'd just get away from where I was, even for a little bit. It was only going to be a half-day trip where I get to see the sunrise, take in my surroundings, meditate, and find some inner peace before going back to my mediocre life. I ended up getting there once the sun rose, which was a bummer, but it wasn't going to stop me from enjoying watching the waves. The location I went to is technically an island, but there is a massive bridge that you can use to drive over there. Once you get on the island, it's the shape of a long strip, and it can go on for miles if you drive north of it. So I decided to drive a good 8 or 10 miles out by car, where I knew there would be no people, and I can just be alone. Some people do drive down that way to go deep sea fishing, but while I was driving, I didn't see any other cars. Once I got to an access point on the beach, I made a dumb move and decided to drive into the sand. I have a Kia Optima, so in no way is my car capable of driving through sand. Don't ask me why. I was kind of in a screw it, what could go wrong moment, and within 5 feet of getting into the access point, my car got stuck. There's no cell signal since I was way out there, no people, just me and my sunken car. Surprisingly, my mind was just, well, what I've been through in my life has been way worse, and I felt way worse, so this isn't so bad. I calmly went and checked what I was dealing with, and yeah, the car was mega stuck in the sand. I shrugged, rolled up my sleeves, and started to dig in an attempt to get the tires out of the soft sand. I figured I could do that for some time before I get tired, and if it didn't work, I'd just leave my car there and go enjoy the day and figure out things later. It was probably 7 AM at the time, so if I had to do an 8 to 10 mile walk, then no biggie. Probably in about 5 minutes of me just digging, all of a sudden I hear a voice behind me that scared the jeebers out of me. I turned to see an older gentleman in fishing gear with a big 4x4 Ford truck standing a few feet away from me asking me if everything was okay. The most distinct feature on him was that his shirt had his name embroidered on it with M. Zuniga. He was probably in his 60s. White hair I could tell by the tips that stuck out under his beige cap, round glasses, and a bit tanned. He looked like a normal old guy to be ready to go fishing. It was strange though. I didn't hear his car or even notice him getting out and walking up to me, and I was the only person there. There wasn't much background noise since I wasn't remotely close to the ocean, so it would have been hard to miss him coming up. He again asked me if I was okay. I said yeah, perfectly fine for the most part. You're crazy for trying to drive this car in there. It wouldn't have made it, he told me. I kind of laughed and told him yeah, it was a pretty dumb move on my part. He started inspecting my car and told me that he can use his truck to pull me out, and I obliged. After a few minutes of tangling around with some wires and maneuvering my car, my baby was out. I thanked him again for his generosity. "What's your name?" he asked me. I let him know, and he said it was nice to meet me. He looked around a bit, kinda peering into my car. "And what are you doing out here all alone?" I told him I had a day off work and just wanted to enjoy the day. He stares at me for a few moments, then introduces himself. "My name is Mario Zuniga. Where are you from?" I tell him the city I came from, and his eyes lit up. "Oh, I'm from there too. I have a clinic in city, and I'm a veterinarian." After some small talk, I mentioned where I work, and he knew exactly where I was talking about. Oh yeah, the one off street name. And he seemed to be very familiar with the city. After all, he did say he lived there. After a bit more talking, he stuck out his hand and I shook it. He clasped his hand with his other hand and held it, and told me, "I hope you're doing okay. I like to look out for people and just wanted to see how you're doing. I'm going fishing, but I'm heading out a couple miles from here and will probably be out all day, and I'd love to invite you, but I don't know when you'll have to leave." I told him I appreciated the offer, but that it was okay. I wasn't planning on staying long. He told me that if I wanted to hang out at the beach, it's probably best if I head south instead, where I can park in an actual parking lot and just walk my way up the shore, and I agreed. He wished me the best and reminded me that things will be okay, and went on his way. I don't know if I gave off that solemn kind of energy, and he felt it, or thought I may have wanted to do something extreme while alone out here, but his last words of reminding me that things are going to be okay stuck with me potently. I ended up going to the south side and hanging on the beach there for a couple of hours, then decided to Google him since he was a vet in my town. The city I live in is relatively small, and I only know of 3 vet clinics in the area. I did an extensive search of his name and looked up the majority of vets that work in those clinics and could not find an ounce of this man anywhere. It was as if he didn't exist, almost, because even then I felt like he had appeared out of thin air, and on top of that, I was the only person that saw him. To this day, I kind of felt like he was some sort of guardian angel to me, especially when he reminded me that people do care and there are people there to look out for you. I'm curious to know what you guys think of this encounter. Please let me know. Case Notes, File Number 31. As peculiar and hard to explain it is, I almost feel like it was just meant to be this way. An intersection of fates that brought you the small token of joy, hope, even faith in humanity that you needed desperately. Was it fate, a crossover glitch, or just happenstance? What I do know is that Mr. Zuniga was your guardian angel in his small way, either by celestial means or terrestrial. Case file number 32, written by user Janice DG, who's taking care of mentally challenged individuals. One of them has a physical outburst, which leads to knowledge they wouldn't have received otherwise. Several years ago, I was working at a group home for developmentally disabled men. We're talking grown men with the mental capabilities of a 2 or 3-year-old. I loved every one of those guys, but one guy in particular, let's call him Jack, was adored by everyone, but had psychotic tendencies. He occasionally tried to kill people. He was very strong, but not very coordinated, so he never actually succeeded. Jack was having a very good day. None of the usual indicators that he was going to be aggressive in any way. It was a Monday night after dinner, and we were sitting in the living room playing and talking. Jack was smiling and laughing, so I wasn't on guard against anything. Suddenly, he jumped up straight and punched me in the jaw. It wasn't very hard at all, but he immediately fell over, like I said, no coordination, and hit his head on the wooden arm of the sofa, It split his head open just a little, but he bled out a lot. I restrained him and he calmed down almost immediately and started apologizing. Usually he'll take him about an hour or more to calm down and then apologize profusely. A quick examination and we determined that he needed stitches, so we packed him up and headed to the ER. The doctor came in, applied a little glue instead of stitches, and everything was right as rain. Waiting for paperwork and discharge, I heard a familiar name being called out in the hallway. My father-in-law's name, to be exact. Let's say it was Mike. I made sure the other staff member could handle Jack and went to check on my father-in-law. I saw my father-in-law being wheeled unconscious into a room. I grabbed a passing nurse. "That's my father-in-law. What's going on?" The nurse told me that Mike had had a massive heart attack and most likely would not make it. She also told me that his wife was in the lobby. Now, Mike's wife, my wife's stepmother, is a straight-up bitch. She had called her daughter Mike's stepdaughter, and that's it. She hadn't notified my wife, Mike's only biological daughter. She didn't call Mike's mother. She didn't call Mike's sister. She didn't call anyone on Mike's side of the family to let them know that anything was wrong at all. Before anyone says that she may have been too distraught or worried to call anyone, she had a new boyfriend less than 2 weeks later. If she was distraught, it was only because Mike was paying her bills. I called my wife to let her know. She called the rest of her family. I went back to Jack and the other staff member. We got Jack checked out and back home. On the way back to the group home, I said to Jack, "Well, little buddy, I guess you did your part to get me where I needed to be. Thank you." He grinned real big and gave me a thumbs up. If Jack hadn't had that physical outburst and gotten hurt in the process, it literally could have been days before Mike's family knew anything about his heart attack and death. Case notes, file number 32. This is a great though sad story, even though I'm not entirely convinced it was a glitch per se. Coincidences do happen. Yet Jack's reaction seems to indicate he knew something deeper had happened relating to your life, at least on a subconscious level. Almost like he was drip-fed the emotional state that was required to help you, without truly understanding why. So I'd chalk this up to either coincidence or a spiritual connection. And by spiritual, in effect, I mean obtaining and processing information from beyond our own universe. Maybe connected parallel universes. Versions of ourselves that have more information or different information. The magic of this is our inability to explain the why or how of it, at least for now. Case file number 33, written by user Spike Rutland. His wife had a stroke. She survived. But then one day she hadn't. Then she was back. What's going on? 8 years ago, my wife had her first stroke and was hospitalized for over a week. I never left her side. Despite a huge setback caused by an incompetent nurse, she'd taken my wife's blood pressure while she was sleeping, and it was normal. Severe high blood pressure caused by stress was the diagnosis, so she'd pushed for my wife to be released the next day, but when she woke up, her blood pressure shot back up. The nurse tried giving her several injections and pills to bring it back down so she could be released, and the stress of it all, possibly plus the meds, caused her largest stroke yet. One of her eyes looked like it was going to pop out of her head. She was incoherent, and it was terrifying. Her mom and I were both in the room. She was stabilized and released about 2 weeks later. At home, I became her constant caretaker, which I am to this day. A month or so later, I went out to get groceries. I did this with my car, which was a black Honda Element. It's important to note that my mother-in-law also drove an Element, but it was orange. I loaded the groceries into the car and drove home. My wife's mother came out to meet me. We lived with her mom after her dad passed away in 2010, in a panic, asking where I'd been. I was confused. "I went out to get my wife food, Mom." Then the look she gave me was of absolute pity and grief. She called back into the house to my wife's adopted brother who was also living there. "It happened again! Come help get him inside." Then she looked at me, hugged me, and said softly, crying a little, "Honey, your wife passed in the hospital a month ago. We were both there. You sold your car to pay for her funeral. That's why you borrowed mine." I stared at her, pulled away, and whirled to look at the car I had just been getting the groceries out of. It was her orange Element. What? There were no groceries in the back. Our black Element was nowhere to be seen. My brother-in-law came out and tried to get me inside as the full weight of reality hit me. My wife was dead. Not waiting for me in our room with our cat. She was dead, and I would never see her again. As the screen door closed behind us when they got me inside, I felt a jarring sensation. Suddenly I was back in the car, the black one, mine, in the parking lot at the grocery store, having just pulled the driver's door closed with some force. That was the jarring sensation. I looked in the rear view. Groceries. This was definitely our car. I pulled out my cell and called my wife. I woke her from a nap and told her what I'd just experienced. She was freaked out but comforted me and reiterated that she was okay and I'd see her when I got home, which I did. Case Notes, File Number 33. Is this the basis for insanity, I wonder? Imagine this happened to you, but you didn't switch back to normal reality or your perception of it. You'd feel crazy because, by all objective evidence, you believe the entire contrary to reality for a few hours minimum. And most curiously in your account, your mother-in-law and brother said you had done it again, meaning that this has happened to you prior in that reality that you switched to temporarily. You believed your wife had survived when she hadn't in that version of the world. But what does this tale reveal? Have you switched between universes before without remembering? Or is it the you in that alternate play being switched into constantly by other yous from even more parallel realities? My goodness, is this perplexing or what? Why do these switches even happen? We need to figure that out because it seems to be increasing in frequency. The author responded to my message. That's kinda what I got from it too. That forgetting my wife was dead was a common thing in that reality. It's not unheard of. In a different comment on this thread, I talked about how my mother-in-law bought a new car with part of her husband's life insurance payout, but bought the specific car she did because it would be able to haul my father-in-law's music equipment to his gigs when he'd been dead for several months at the time. I think that's what was happening to me in that reality or dream or vision. Case file number 34, written by user Skinny Bone Man. A flash of unexplainable brightness was observed by him and his mom in their own house during the morning. My parents are working from home. I just quit my full-time job because I start school full-time in the next couple of weeks. I woke up around 10:30 this morning and got up to check on what my parents were up to. Due to the virus, they're both working from home. My father was out, but my mom was working at the table we have in the dining room. So I decided to sit with her in the chair across from her and talk for a bit. I just started scrolling through TikTok videos on my phone, and all of a sudden, everything around my phone was covered in what seemed to be a giant white light. Not like someone flashed headlights in our house, and even if they did, the sun is shining bright, so it wouldn't have made much of a difference. I immediately look up at my mom, and we're both giving each other this, "What the hell?" look, and soon after, we're saying, "What the hell?" This was a very bright flash, not anything like a phone could produce. It looked to have immense energy behind it, almost like a lightning strike, but concentrated into this room. I have no idea what happened, and the internet is not giving me any answers other than my eyes have something wrong, which I know is false since my mom and I both saw this at the same time. Update. My mom is still freaked out. She believes something paranormal, maybe even aliens. I'm unsure what theory to go with. Reflected light off a vehicle is logical to me, but it still seems unlikely. When the sun comes back up tomorrow, I'm gonna see where in the sky it's located, around the same time when we saw the light, and see if the angles are plausible for the car theory. Case notes, file number 34. So reading the comments in this thread, a lot of folks are suggesting it either could be ball lightning or reflections from the sunlight or a passing car. If it was ball lightning, there should have been some level of sound accompanied by it. The reports of ball lightning involve a hissing noise associated, almost like a static from an old TV box. As for reflective light being amplified to their specific area in the house, this is more plausible, but it seems unlikely given that this happened in their house. If some elements outside could trigger such a reflective burst of light, surely it would have happened to them before. There's another user in the thread that reported the same phenomena, but it was at night in their truck, no one near them, a remote area. Not likely to have been some headlight reflection from a passing car that they never saw. Do let us know if anything like this happens again to you. Case file number 35. Written by user Quattro Viente. His entire town experienced a sensation of extreme danger and unease overnight. You know that feeling you get when you see a big spider in your house, and then you look away for a minute and when you look back it's just not there anymore? Well, hundreds of people in the city I live in felt that creepy sensation simultaneously 2 nights ago. I've always been skeptical. I'm always the first one to laugh at this kind of paranormal stuff, but this I believe is the only thing I can't find an explanation for. January the 5th, 2021, 2 days ago at the time I'm writing this, was a normal day. Virtual classes, Zooming friends, and some video games. Just your average day. However, when nighttime came, specifically around midnight, I started feeling this really tense atmosphere in my bedroom. It's not like I saw something or heard anything in particular, but it just felt like there was something or someone there with me, hiding. It got to the point where I had to get up from bed constantly to turn on the lights and check the floor, because it felt like there was a rat or spider creeping around somewhere. I wouldn't say it was terrifying, but it felt cold or a heavy atmosphere. Just to make it clear, it's not like I watched a horror movie or played a horror video game before going to bed. Like I said, it was a completely normal daily routine day. When I did finally fall asleep, I dreamt of a lot of things, and all of my dreams were set in my own house. None of them were nightmares though. The next morning went normal, and I had almost forgotten how weird last night was. But then, when I was having lunch with my sister, she mentioned she was really tired because she got almost no sleep, and it felt like there was a snake in her bedroom. When my mom heard about it too, she told us that our dog, who sleeps in her bedroom, was anxious all night. And not only us, but a lot of my sister's friends on Facebook were sharing their experiences that they couldn't sleep well at all. Their dogs were barking all night, heard women screaming, and overall just felt this really tense atmosphere, and that someone was watching them. It almost became a meme. Even a local news anchor mentioned it on his social media. I am not necessarily saying this was a paranormal event, but it was weird, and I can't find an explanation for it. I tried to do some research on Google, but couldn't find anything. In case someone is curious about this, the place I live in is Cuenca, a small city in the highlands of southern Ecuador. Case notes, file number 35. So 2 things to point out. The first, the 5th was of course a highly tense day and night for everyone. The collective torrent of emotions felt by everyone in the world, and still kind of felt like now. While it's not an impossibility to suggest that this caused or contributed towards the ensemble of fear and unease felt by everyone in your town. Now that said, I don't think this would lead to the feelings of actual physical danger, like there's a presence there. There was more to it. I did read about low-level frequencies having this effect, such as the plumbing in old houses giving that eerie sense of a presence, something being off or wrong. But what could cause such frequencies on a mass scale the size of a town? I looked it up and it does appear that Ecuador is near to, even crossing beneath a major fault line. Just a theory. Case file number 36. Written by user Psychopath Hunter. On a run, everything suddenly inexplicably goes gray. Everything goes silent. everyone is missing. This happened to me when I was a teenager, but I still remember it very well. I'm a bit insecure, so I've always tried to stay away from the streets during the day, if it's not necessary. But I do not like to be seen walking around. When I go out to exercise, running around my neighborhood, I do it at night around 10 or 11 p.m., so that there are not too many people in the street, especially during the week, and if there were, I would be hiding in the shadows. In that way, I feel safer and don't have much anxiety, which I also sometimes have when in crowded places. Anyway, I was running in my neighborhood that is between hills, very close to a mountain. There was hardly anyone on the street, a few cars driving around, the warm weather, some dogs barking in the distance, etc. Everything was normal until when I went running up a sloping street. I suddenly felt strong dizziness in my head. At the same time, I felt a kind of electric shock going through my whole body, which made me shudder, and in a fraction of a second, absolutely everything around me lost its colors. Everything was gray. The parked cars, the lights in the houses, and the street lighting, the color of the houses in some apartment complexes, the plants, my clothes, and even my own body were all in different shades of gray. Literally, it was as if everything was made of gray. I felt like I was inside an old movie where everything is black and white, but here everything was simply gray. At the same time, all the sounds around me disappeared too. Everything was absolutely awash in a very uncomfortable, strange silence. The only sounds I heard were my footsteps, my voice, and my breathing agitated by exercise. Immediately I got scared and stopped running. I didn't know what to think. I thought that something too strange had happened to my brain, and that this is why I had been left seeing without color, and I didn't hear any other sounds external to myself. I closed my eyes tightly, thinking that perhaps I was dreaming while awake, or it was my imagination, and I thought that when I opened them again, everything would return to normal, but no, it wasn't like that at all. Everything was still gray and without sounds. I approached the windows of some houses to see inside them, if it was also the same, or other people saw what I saw, but surprisingly, there were no people. Everything that was gray became clearer when lights reflected from them, or the sky, but the rest of the things were dark gray. I saw one after another house and even touched on several of them, but there was no one in that other place that I was experiencing. Soon I also realized that there were no more cars driving on the street. No one anywhere. I didn't even see animals, and usually in that street where I was running, some garages there have dogs, but there were no dogs either. It was as if I was the only living being in that other place. I was too confused. I didn't know what to do. I felt like in one of those post-apocalyptic or zombie movies, where the protagonist is apparently alone. That's exactly how I felt. It was a very difficult feeling to explain. Adrenaline, anxiety, stress, fear, hopelessness, loneliness, uncertainty, all that was turning my confused head that I could not find any logical explanation for what I was living. I yelled for help as loud as I could, repeatedly yelled, "Help, please, hello? Anyone there? Help!" But nobody answered me. Everything was too silent, too horrible. My concern grew, even more, when I thought of my parents and my brother, a year older than me. Foolishly and without any foundation to prove it, I thought they would be dead. I don't know. That was the first thing I thought when I remembered them, so I started running as fast as I could in the direction of my parents' house. I was running like this, surrounded by gray and totally alone. In one of the main avenues of my neighborhood, you can see the rest of the city with a panoramic view, and when I did, everything else was also gray. I didn't want to go beyond my neighborhood, and I didn't dare to leave my area, entering the unknown under such strange conditions. Suddenly, in a fraction of a second, and in a way I can't explain, everything was back to normal. The colors, the sounds, the people in the houses, the food carts, even the animals, everything was there, surrounding me, in color. First I saw the colors and sounds. Shortly after I heard people inside the houses, few cars driving around and some animals. This in a way calmed me down, but it also scared me a lot because I didn't know what just happened. When I got home, the first thing I did was hug my parents and even my brother because I really came to think that I had lost them forever, and I can't imagine my life without them. I told them what happened, and when I explained to them, they didn't believe me. They told me that if I wanted to hug them, I had no need to make up such a silly excuse, but it didn't really matter. I know what happened. It was terrifying and too worrying. Finding myself totally alone, surrounded by gray. I never knew what happened to me that night, but honestly, it wasn't pleasant at all. I don't want to ever experience it again. I know it may be hard to believe, but I swear to God, it really happened to me. Case notes, file number 36. Okay, so the first comment in this thread is linking towards what's called a gray out, a Wikipedia article on it, which I do find very interesting. It's where exertion is denying blood oxygen to the brain, because there's not enough oxygen in the blood to supply the brain, so it can't continue to process reality in the correct way. Makes sense, right? You are running out of breath uphill. But this doesn't really fit when you push deeper. The first issue, the demonstration of a gray out looks more like a fade out. I'll have a link in the description. Not necessarily pure gray, but with more like fading on it. He did observe light in his area changing contrasts of objects. Some were darker, some were brighter, and the difference between the two was obvious. Second, gray outs don't last very long at all. After you stopped running, oxygen would replenish quickly, maybe after a few seconds. The experience the author described seems to be minutes, maybe even half an hour or so. There's no way his mind would remain so lucid for that long while starving for oxygen. He even kept running back home when he believed his family was in danger. Third, it specifically states that gray outs don't impair sound, so why did the world go quiet too? And he could hear himself, his footsteps, but nothing else outside of himself. He saw no one else either, even in their own homes, no dogs, nothing. To me, it's not an explanation that fits, no. Somehow the impression I get, this was sort of purgatory, and it's probably not biblical purgatory. But if I had to paint a picture of what that place would be like, this is it. It reminds me of the ending of the movie Silent Hill, where the character is stuck in limbo. Everything is grayed out, faded, and he can't see anyone. Like being stuck in a sort of oblivion. The author responded, saying that the experience for him felt like it lasted at least 10 minutes. And that concludes our stories for the night. If you enjoyed them, and my narration of them, consider leaving a like. I also enjoy reading any comments you may have. Let me know. And finally, subscribing is a good idea. I upload Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. EST. I'll see you all there.